Welcome everyone. With the release of Part 4, Volume 9, here is a review of the events of Part 4, Volume 8 to catch you up to speed. Rozemyne returns to Ehrenfest once more following her second term at the Royal Academy. Her days are spent in harmony as she meets her new little brother, searches for a lay noble retainer, experiments with cooking fish, and delves into her grandfather's past. But the undeniable fact remains that Ferdinand is acting unusually. At the heart of this mystery lies the mention of Adelgisa, and as Rozemyne ponders what it might mean, Ferdinand reveals a shocking truth. I should have died before my baptism. The secrets about his birth, his final promise with his father, and a bitter choice. How will Ferdinand respond when the very future of Ehrenfest rests on his shoulders? Once again, we did a voice chat over on my Discord server to discuss this volume, what parts we liked, and of course, that unexpected development and that tear-wrenching chapter decisions. Before starting, I want to give a shout out to my Ko-fi members who tuned in and contributed to this recording. Alyssa, Ben, Brandon, Crazy Maton, and JC Fergie. You're all the best, and thank you for your support. Now, without further ado, let's get this started. The prologue of this volume is a Melchior point of view. It is the first time that we get to meet him, though we've heard all about Sylvester's youngest son.
He's just adorable. I mean, he seems ever so precious.
He's a cinnamon bun.
He is. Not only is he just lovable and earnest, but we learn several things. One of them is how children prepare for baptism. And among other things, they need to be able to move their mana so that they can complete their baptism ceremony and give a blessing. Through this perspective, we learn just how spectacular then it was for Rozemyne to bless a hall full of hundreds of nobles, given that a child like Melchior, he's struggling just to return the blessing.
And also how Florencia helped him feel the flow of mana within his body by using her mana to have him forcefully push his out. So you can get the feeling of it, because this whole life he's been using, just like most nobles, that he's been using a tool that passively sucks out his mana, make sure that he doesn't have a lot in his body, so he doesn't know how to manually move his mana around.
If there's anybody in this world who will have a mana closest to him, it'll be his mother, correct? But even still, he could feel like it was kind of uncomfortable, not vile, not yucky, but it was still uncomfortable to have somebody else's mana on his body. So he pushed it out. And yeah, it's like something that you would only do with very close people. So in this case, only your mother would be able to show you how to do that, because passing mana is just very intimate. Let's just say that. Another point that I found it really interesting is just how Melchior gets along with his other siblings.
So I noticed he really looked up to a lot of, or at least his older brother and sister, outside of mine. I mean, of course he looked up to mine as well. Mm-hmm. But he was very interested as well in a lot of the religious ceremonies that they had participated in when Rozemyne was, in her slumber, in her sleep. And I thought that was also fairly powerful and definitely a growth development, and something that I think we can probably look forward to seeing with him growing as a character.
It felt like he partially drank the Kool-Aid when it came to the saint image, where it's just like, oh, she brought all these toys and gifts and stuff, and she can do all this in the temple, and I want to go to the temple because my brother and sister talk so much about her, and they want to go to the temple too, so I must also need to go to the temple, right?
Yeah. I know. His whole motive for going to a temple is he wants to do like all these amazing things like Rozemyne and Ferdinand, because he learned after he heard all about the Interduchy Tournament and all the terrorist attack, he's like, wow, like she was able to make these divine instruments. And he made the connection. Rozemyne and Ferdinand are from the temple, and only they can form divine instruments. So then he's like, mother, father, I want to join the temple as well. What were their various reactions?
Par for the course at this point, I think.
Yeah, it still shows how much general nobility hates the temple.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it also shows the generational divide too, because there's so much built-in prejudice against the temple in the elder generation, where the kids are just like, oh, look at this cool shit we can do. Let's go.
Yeah, I gotta agree with that.
It's a great way to show how the new generation is viewing the temple completely differently from the older generation. because they don't know how it was functioning before. And it's a show of progress, how much everything has changed in Ehrenfest so far.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's another way to show how Rozemyne is influencing her entire duchy.
That's
because
right.
all these changes started with her, even if she doesn't realize it.
Yes.
Yeah, not even necessarily her entire duchy, just everyone around her in general, it feels like at this point.
Exactly. And the thing about it is, Melchior has such an interesting point of view because he was only 2 years old when this whole upheaval took place. He was only 2 when Veronica was locked away, so he can take in the whole world and takes it for granted that yes, Rozemyne is Rozemyne and she's amazing, and because that's just who she is. He doesn't realize like all of the changes that took place for the world to be as it is, as he knows it. So because he was only 2 when Veronica was around, he gets along very well with his siblings. He was never ostracized by Veronica like Charlotte was, and there's no competitiveness between him and Wilfried. They're both just like to dote on him like a little brother. Because at this point, he is basically out of the running for 𝐏𝐻. No one expects him to try to fill in somebody's shoes or to try to like knock down a sibling because it's already given. By this point, Wilfried and Rozemyne are going to be the power couple of Ehrenfest. So what he's looking forward to is actually supporting them, and he respects all 3 siblings, but he idolizes Rozemyne. And it's funny because since Charlotte loves Rozemyne, she always tells him that she's an example to follow. And Wilfried always brings him toys and picture books that Rozemyne made. And finally, his parents are always talking about her recipes and even how she helped save Bertilde, which is something that I had totally like forgotten about. But since Florencia is from the neighboring duchy and they were having problems, she gave them pointers on how to make their harvest improve. And that saved Florencia's home duchy. So everybody all been praising her in such a way that he takes it for granted, like she's just somebody that he wants to be like.
Cannot wait to see how he grows as a character.
Yeah, me too. Now, after this, we get Rozemyne and everybody else has returned from the Royal Academy. Part 4, Volume 7 covered the Interduchy Tournament, and it was just action-packed. So much went on. There was a graduation, there was a terrorist attack, there was impromptu dinner for publishing rights. There was just so much going on. So when she returns to the castle, Bonifacius is right there welcoming her back.
He strikes again.
It's like that Simpsons Ralph meme. I'm in danger.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't it the year before that he threw her in the air and she almost hit her head or something like that, and they had to pull her? Her guard knights had to save her.
Yeah, Cornelius basically grabbed her from midair with her cape and pulled her back down.
So yeah, he struck again, but thankfully, she was saved from being crushed to death in a grandpa bear hug. And then the family has dinner together. They all talk about the events that took place. And basically, life goes back to normal, at least superficially, in my opinion. Rozemyne senses some things, specifically a change in Ferdinand, because he is now acting strange. He's basically trying to evade the Royal Academy at all costs. When next year's Interduchy Tournament comes up, he's like, yeah, I don't need to go. Bonifacius can go in my stead. And that's kind of weird. And also, Rozemyne has not forgotten about the run-in with the Sovereign Knight Commander, or some business about the seat of Adalgisa. But she decides to just wait and see how things play out, rather than asking more about it. Another thing that they talked about was that Ferdinand is instructing Rozemyne to include Wilfried and Charlotte in the various duchy businesses that she's been handling by herself. Things like printing and the information gathering. Now, he does this because this will ease her workload, and I think it's also good optics because including her siblings in these endeavors also means that she's willing to give them a piece of the pie.
If she continues to do everything herself, her other siblings will just look incompetent in comparison, especially since Wilfried is supposed to be engaged to her. He should be helping her with all her work to show that he's also part of it.
Now, they also hold mana compression classes. They go very brief through this, they just mention it. But they do say that during this class, the mana compression class, Roderick was finally able to learn her compression method. And he has now officially left his family. And thank goodness that Sylvester will be the one to deal with the disgruntled parent, because an abusive and terrible father like Roderick's should not be allowed to be anywhere near children, especially Roderick. Okay, so there's this issue. Rozemyne needs retainers, but everybody who's worth taking has been taken, so Rozemyne comes up with a practical approach to getting new retainers.
That definitely felt very awkward while I was reading that. Like, ooh.
Yeah, so Brunhild didn't just ask to introduce her little sister just out of the blue. For quite a while, Bertilde had been in training and she had been working towards, becoming a retainer for Rozemyne. In fact, it says that she was being trained specifically for her. So it took a year before Brunhilde was like, okay, maybe now, after you've gone through these steps, maybe now I can introduce you to my mistress. Judith, however, had no idea that, there was all this stuff behind the scenes that you have to do before you introduce your sibling to your master or your mistress. And
right, yeah, it really felt like she was living in the moment at that point. Like she was very excited to introduce, her younger brother to Rozemyne, and then that's when she realized, I haven't even communicated with my brother on this.
That's
not the first time. Not the first time it's happened to her. Do you remember the few books ago, the expedition when they found the Gruns? And
oh yes.
She was basically thrown into the Pandabus with her and Feline and Hartmut, and basically she got all flustered because she thought that she was being treated like the attendants, like she can't fight, but in reality, she should have been focusing on protecting from within the High Beast, and she's the only one who can use ranged weapons effectively.
Yeah. So Judith is still young. She has a long way to go to grow. And yes, she's also very enthusiastic, very spirited young girl, but she has yet to attain that kind of knowledge that she needs to have. So she got told, well, she didn't get told off, but Riarda, scolded her for doing that. And she also scolded Rozemyne because Rozemyne was like, okay, Theodore, it's fine. You can do whatever you want. I support your future goal of protecting your 𝐏𝐻𝐄. But what about becoming just my retainer at the Royal Academy? And Riarda was like, wait a minute, don't. And then she totally ignored Riarda. And she just went on ahead and saying, you should consider it. I would totally let you do it. You would be free to do your career choice after you graduate or after I get out of the Royal Academy. And so after that talk that she had with Theodore, Riarda let her have it because she's also not supposed to do that kind of thing. So she is sent to talk to her guardians, her papas, and she tells them about this practical approach to having new retainers.
The main problem is loyalty. When you take a new retainer, at least with Archduke candidates, it was explained. When you take a new retainer, you have to ensure that they're completely loyal to you, especially since she's going to be the Archduke's first wife in the future. She has to ensure that all retainers that she has stay with her. Although it's a little bit more lax with female retainers because they're expected to get married and have children, so especially guard knights. So they would be released from service when they get pregnant and all that. But for a retainer like Theodore, who not only doesn't want to serve her, he has his own goals. It wouldn't be acceptable for her to accept her on a temporary basis due to loyalty reasons.
True. Ferdinand definitely was adamantly against it. Her attendants have to serve her faithfully for life after their graduation. Yet there are very few retainers for Rozemyne. Unfortunately, while Ferdinand is adamantly against her using part-timer retainers, I guess, she calls him out, says, you only have a few retainers. You have Justus and you have Eckhart, basically. And anytime you need scholars or guards, you basically borrow them from the castle whenever the need arises. And it's funny because her rebuttal makes Karsted hang his head and mutter that she shouldn't adopt only their bad traits. And that was a really funny line.
And Sylvester pointed out that that's exactly what Ferdinand did back when he was in a Royal Academy.
Though Ferdinand does point out that his circumstances were totally different from mine's, because during that time he really was surrounded by enemies on all sides. He was being harassed continually by Veronica, and even their attendants and retainers that he had back then were loyal to Veronica and were just around to harass him. So yeah, it's true that it's different circumstances, so she shouldn't expect to do the same thing he did. However,
that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that her circumstances aren't the same in some ways, because the number of retainers that she can select, there's a lot of conditions that have to be met. First, they have to be in the same faction. They have to be retainers that haven't been chosen by her siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And they have to be of a certain age. They have to be younger.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also she hasn't met many of them since she hasn't been in the playroom in a long time.
Yeah.
If I can just say one thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was only me who interpreted it this way, but I feel like this was a long time since Rozemyne kind of slipped into her old ways. Commoner / formerly Japan resident, where she didn't really think about the loyalties and everything, and she was like, oh, part-time job, I can hire you, that's fine, no problems with that. And it was like she kind of forgot the whole nobility and everything that was going around her, which isn't something that we get to experience a lot as the series moves forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it was a nice reminder that she's still the same silly person and slips up from time to time.
Exactly. And notice that the thing that made her forget herself a little was just about promises. Anything that reminds her of like how you have an ambition in life to protect, or just something that you want to, like an aspiration, like she will support you no matter what. Especially this one that kind of reminded her of the promises and aspirations that she herself has. So she's all up for supporting him, and she totally forgets, the noble training that you're supposed to do everything with decorum, and there's certain orders and procedures you have to do. So yeah, that is a very good point. She kind of forgets herself, but she wouldn't be mine if she didn't forget once in a while. Sylvester ultimately has to end up agreeing to it, since there aren't any other options. He arranges things with Theodore's father and with the 𝐏𝐬 of Kirnberger, whom Theodore one day hopes to serve. And here, the 𝐏𝐬 of Kirnberger, whatever you say it, he actually agrees to it. Yeah, who knows how to say it?
Kindenberg?
Yeah, Kinderberg. So he actually ends up agreeing to it. I think Kirnberger got a great deal. I mean, he got connections to the archducal family by letting Theodore be a retainer part-time, but also he extracted a promise that the Gutenbergs would be sent to his land the next year. So I'm like, you got a really good deal there, dude. Like, I don't see how you could say no, but okay.
Especially because he's going to be Rozemyne's retainers.
Mm-hmm.
You know how all her retainers are extremely competent.
Exactly. So
whether they like it or not.
Yeah, so he's gonna end up totally benefiting from the training that he gets by serving an Archduke candidate. And one of the things that I notice is that everywhere that there's a new printing workshop established, Rozemyne has to go to visit. So we're gonna get to visit Kirnberger soon. Let us move on. So remember that she is told to give Will and Charlotte a slice of the pie. So Will and Charlotte, they join Rozemyne, and for the first time they sit in a meeting between Rozemyne, the Planten Company, and the 𝐏𝐬s who have some printing industry. So this is 𝐏𝐬s, Groschel, and Haldensel. Among many other things discussed, they talked about how transportation of books adds a significant expense.
Now, 𝐏𝐬 Groschel was complaining about the expenses, and Rozemyne pointed out that, yeah, that's true, their transportation costs are expensive, but that's because of the travel distance. And she pointed out that 𝐏𝐬 Haldensel, who's even further away from Ehrenfest's central city, would have to pay even more transportation costs due to the quality of the roads, the number of days it takes to get there, and all of that. But she also said that you can, for now, they're going to be using the teleportation circles that are used to transfer all the harvests during back to the castle. They're going to use that. And the thing about that is that it seems, I'm not entirely sure, it seems like only Archnoble scholars have the mana capacity to use those. And so that's the significance of Rozemyne working on a circle that lay nobles and even mid nobles can use to transport the books, only the books, to Ironfest.
They also discuss other projects like Rozemyne's spring mattress, and most importantly, they talk about Karen, the Klessenberg merchant.
Yeah, I was very, very confused as to what her intentions might have been during this whole volume, honestly. Like, I couldn't tell, like, was she trying to get into, like, Benno's circle, or was she actually abandoned there? And I think it might have been a little bit of both, to be honest. It seemed like her father, like, probably left her there, like, with the intention of her gathering information, but while reading the chapter, or while reading the volume, it didn't really sound like she was that heavily involved in trying to gather a lot of information. I mean, sure, she absolutely did. Near the end, yes, trying to get close to Benno. But I didn't really detect that she was committed to the cause.
We got lucky because, first of all, she's a very, very excellent merchant. Benno himself had to admit it, that her work is spectacular as a merchant. And later we learned that she's also a really good intel gatherer from the reports that they were able to get from her before she left. In previous volumes, it had been hinted that maybe Benno and she would make a match of it. So Rozemyne really wanted to ask him about that, but because all the nobles were around, she was not able to ask. But as it is so far, it seems that Benno is keeping everything, all the precious secrets, he's keeping everything to himself, and that is good. And, if Benno was able to keep information about Mine when she was a Shrine Maiden secret, I'm sure that he's going to be able to also control the flow of information that goes into Karen. And whether she's actively taking information to sell or to give to Klessenberg, or maybe she's just a victim in her father's scheme, it's still necessary for him to control that information, because there's several secrets that he knows and that nobody else can know. I mean, just imagine, what if she learned about the truth of Mine's commoner origins? Like, just imagine what could happen.
Oh, that would shake up the whole sovereignty.
Exactly. So Benno is a very, very smart man. I mean, I love Benno. Too bad we don't get a lot of him lately, but he's a very smart man, and he knows that he needs to be really careful. And so far, I think he's taking the proper precautions. So now we are going to talk about meeting Melchior and Melchior's baptism. We already were introduced to Melchior in the prologue, but now we get to meet him through Rozemyne's perspective.
I don't think it's really lost that she probably sees him as I'm not going to say as a replacement for 𝐏𝐿, but at least as something that she can redirect her love towards.
I mean, they do look pretty similar, now that you think about it.
Yeah. Another thing that I really enjoyed was when she met him, she made a note of utmost importance about him and his appearance. And that was that he is shorter than her. She says that he is shorter than her by the smallest amount, but that makes her supremely happy. And she says also, for the record, I'm not on tiptoes either, so this makes her so, so happy. Plus, once she learns that her little brother is also a bookworm, she has to force herself to calm down. Like, Riarda's like, dude, calm down. You don't have the tools that Ferdinand gave you, so just please calm down, otherwise you're gonna pass out. Because she even wants to fetch the High Bishop's Bible to read to Melchior stories from there, since he said that stories about the gods are his absolute favorite. And at the end of it all, Charlotte feels a little jealous because she feels like Melchior just stole my older sister now, and Rozemyne loves him more than she loves me now. While Will wishes that she would show him a little more affection since they're engaged. He's like, I have never received even affection like you have, and I'm engaged to her. To which Rozemyne replies, well, you and I are going to be the Archduke couple, and you can't be in the same standing as my little brother and little sister because I can spoil them a lot, but you need to, be whipped up into shape. So I am not going to be nicer or softer on you.
And she also pointed out that she was really soft on him during the Ivory Tower incident.
That is true.
Where she could have just said nothing and have him be disowned to begin with.
That's true. Will has absolutely no other choice but to say like, oh, okay, fine. He agrees. So one final thing is their baptism. So it's noted that Melchior has 5 attributes. He has darkness, water, fire, wind, and earth. I don't know. I just think it's really interesting to know about people's attributes. Because we know that Will has 6 and Charlotte has 5. And of course, Rozemyne has all 7. Now, the next part is 𝐼𝐷𝐿𝐵𝐻's fish cuisine. Rozemyne finally gets Sylvester's chefs to teach her chefs how to make fish. And at last, she gets to taste it. At first, she basically said like, this food is like disappointing because they made a broth or a soup or something and they threw away the broth, of course. So it was really disappointing food. Even everybody else around was like, this food is this. I prefer normal, quote unquote normal soup, which is of course so not normal. They're actually trying normal soup themselves. Rozemyne soup has now become the standard by which everybody judges soups, and the 𝐼𝐷𝐿𝐵𝐻 cuisine was disappointing to them. So they wanted to invite Aurelia since the fish was hers and she donated it to Rozemyne. So Rozemyne's like, well, it would be nice to share the food with her. Why don't we have her over? And Lamprecht was like, you know what? She's just super pregnant. Like, not as in like she's super showing, but she's just sick all the time. So instead of having her over and inviting all of the Karstedt family over, they basically put some food away in a time-stopping device so that Aurelia could enjoy 𝐼𝐷𝐿𝐵𝐻 cuisine at home, enjoy those flavors that are so nostalgic. And that was a really nice gesture that even Lamprecht appreciated. And actually, the only food that she was able to enjoy was that tasteless, bland food. Everything else she just could not consume. She was just too sick to do so.
Yeah, and one of the things I really liked about this chapter is that really emphasized like that love between Lamprecht and Aurelia. Because it wasn't really emphasized much previously in the novels. Like, it was certainly hinted at. But we didn't really see that, especially, at least I didn't see that until now. And I think that was very valuable, and I really did enjoy that.
That was a love story that started in the Royal Academy, and you kind of see just the progression of how it goes from like a relationship that started like, hey, I need to marry a girl from this other duchy, and she's like, well, I need to marry somebody. So it was a very practical union, and then it just grew into something that was, really nice. It withstood the test of distance, as we would say, though probably it had something to do with Aurelia's family wanting to push for the marriage, but still, despite all the machinations going around them, despite all the political, just the things that were at play when it came to their relationship, they have formed a really nice bond, and that is so sweet to see.
Oh, you're talking shipwise?
Yes, shipwise.
I personally like Leon Rose and Cornelius better.
Oh, no, I'm not comparing them, of course, but I'm just saying like Lamprecht as a person. But yeah, regarding ships, we know a lot more about Cornelius and Leonor, and yes, I am all for that love train, and give me more. I want to see more of that lewd hand-holding action.
It is kind of funny that they managed to make hand-holding lewd.
Noble society is so standoffish that even something as a hug has to be given special significance. So whenever we do see hugs, it's only with very close people and for very special circumstances. So I think it adds a little bit of poignancy, and I think it works for the plot. So we're gonna go back at the temple. Roderick is his first time being here. So Philine and the others teach him the ropes. He struggles trying to do all the paperwork that Ferdinand expects the scholars to do. Just as Philine and, the others did. But she encourages him, saying, I've been down that path before. Don't you worry, we'll get better. You'll get the hang of it. Meanwhile, here's a quote that I really loved. Unfortunately, Angelica had then declared that she had not walked this path before and never would. And then Hartmut had noted that he was able to do the work just fine from the very beginning. The troublesome duo had managed to knock Roderick back down into the depths of despair with these remarks, so that Damiel had to shoo them both away before they could do any further damage to Roderick.
Yeah, but they can't really be compared. Angelica is a guard knight, so she shouldn't be doing scholar work in the first place. It just so happens that Rozemyne has so much scholar work to do that her guard knights ended up helping anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And right. as far as Hartmut's concerned, he's a arch noble, so already just by the fact that he had better tutors and better resources, and he has. As somebody of higher status, he has to be more competent.
Yeah, and Damiel was also, of course, being dragged into a lot of that work as well.
So during the temple, again, there's a meeting with the merchants, and this time they bring her the new product, her mattress, and they also present to her a padded chair, which is like, I'm guessing it's like a reading chair, like that's how I imagine it. And it's not quite like the ones that we have in our world, but since it uses spring technology, it is much more comfortable than the chairs that they use at that time, which basically are just wooden chairs with cloth on top of it. They're not really upholstered for comfort. And Ferdinand is actually in that meeting too, and he's quite taken with the comfy chair and orders one for himself, though he orders one that is bench-sized rather than individual-sized. You have to love how rich this guy is to just, offhandedly order one. Like at this point, Rozemyne and Ferdinand's they're rolling in gold, because she just orders things without even thinking about how many gold coins or how many silver coins. It's very telling that at this point Rozemyne doesn't even have to really ask how much is this gonna take. She just orders things, and she's basically rolling in it after all of these inventions and all these books that she's been selling. I don't even know how much money she might have had now, but if we remember from the previous book, she was willing to spend 18 gold coins on a hobby. And that 18 large gold coins. Thank you for
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
right, that's how much the manuscript was worth.
Mm-hmm.
Just in the materials.
Mm-hmm.
Not even
in one single book, yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, I don't think we're gonna be worrying about money from now on. So she's turning into more like a proper noble girl, or especially like a proper noble archducal girl who doesn't really have to worry about money, because she really doesn't. She has money of her own, and I'm guessing that she also has a stipend from all her parents. So since there's fewer people around, she takes the opportunity to ask straight out, Benno, I heard that somebody wanted you to marry Karen girl, that girl from Klassenberg. And finally, Benno is, he's still reluctant to talk about it because, there's still some nobles around, but he puts an end to all that talk about hopes of him marrying Karen. We all kind of heave a collective sigh of relief, to tell the truth. But I had read some short stories that we don't get in any of the light novels, unfortunately. I think they're purchase privilege short stories, and we see a glimpse from the people of the lower city, and I kind of felt shame. It's too bad that we don't get these side stories, because through those we get a glimpse that there was a little something going on there, and it would have been nice for Benno, if had it been under any other circumstances, it would have been nice for Benno to have someone. Now let's go into fish dissections, which is something everybody was really interested in. And tell me your thoughts.
As a fisherman, hearing how they have to handle all the fish, in each individual species of fish, was just so fascinating to me every time I heard about them. So I thoroughly loved this whole chapter.
Yeah, it was really weird how people were treating the dissection of the fish like it was a battlefield. At first, Rozemyne was extremely confused. Was like, "What? Isn't this just cutting them? Why do you need to defend yourself?"
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. Usually, while I'm cutting fish, my biggest adversary is usually seagulls. But once I started reading this book, I was like, oh wow.
It was like a battle. Ferdinand told her, you better suit up, have everybody armored properly. And turns out that a bunch of the fish that was given to Aurelia were dangerous, and some were impossible to commoners to deal with. There was a fish that blew out its thorns and they were poisonous. I don't know. It was just crazy. It was like a battlefield. So I had to wonder, Aurelia wanted fish. You know, she was going to move to a new duchy. So why did they give her this kind of like fish that commoners would not be able to deal with? She was not going to be able to enjoy the fish. That was a very hateful move if it was done on purpose, and my guess is it was done on purpose.
I don't really think it was done on purpose.
You don't?
No, I don't. So I think like they expected her to be moving on, to a new duchy, and I imagine their expectation was maybe, hopefully, that somebody could at least cater to her. And I mean, if that wasn't the case, I mean, hopefully she brought her own cooks, which as a noble, I would imagine she probably would have. And they probably would have known how to handle many of the fish that they had provided in that time freezer that they had.
I think that the reasoning for why, she didn't bring a chef, so she only brought very few attendants with her.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right. I think that the reasoning for why they would give her, if it wasn't malicious, the reasoning for why they gave her those types of fish is because she was expected to communicate with a former Veronic affection.
Okay,
Remember?
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, they since they're from 𝐷𝐻𝐿, it's already been revealed most of them were from 𝐷𝐻𝐿.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Because, they came with Lady Gabrielle at the time, when Gabrielle married into the duchy. It was suspected if she was going to communicate with them and, take retainers from them and all that they would know how to cook those fish. But since she decided to join the Florencia faction, she had pretty much contact with no one. Like, she was isolated almost completely and only allowed to talk to very specific people. Even more so when she got pregnant.
That is an interesting point, because then it makes the fact that she actually prepared food. Arensback food, she put it in her time-stopping device, and then they told her, no, you can't do that. They threw out her food and they put in the fish. So now that if you give it that kind of perspective, then it makes sense that they're really forcing her, like, you are going to do what we want you to do, and if you want to eat your precious fish, then you better be in touch with the Veronica faction.
Right, yeah, appreciate our culture.
Yeah.
Please propagate it.
For sure. So yeah, thank you for that. That does make sense. So during this time, Rozemyne sees just how badass Ferdinand and Angelica are. She says that they look cooler now than ever. They were like expert sushi chefs dominating the cutting board.
I found really interesting that basically one of the fish is a live grenade. They basically put a bunch of those fish inside of first they filleted a regular fish and they put them in a pot. Then they put all these tiny fish inside and closed the lid and held it on tight. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of explosions could be heard from within the pot.
Yeah.
And when they opened it up, it was just pure fish paste. So it's kind of funny how they have fish that are basically worked like grenades.
And another thing about these fish and mana is that because some of these fish you have to give them mana to kill them, you get ingredients, like legit good ingredients out of these.
I think the fish is called a radish. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't explained if the fish's scales were all rainbow colored, all 7 colors, because mine was the one that poured mana into it, or because they were going to be rainbow colored anyways.
It wasn't explained, but...
It was or wasn't?
I don't think it was. It just said that once she put her mana, the outcome was a face stone that was a rainbow colored face stone. And I think that it's rainbow colored because Rozemyne dyed it.
I think it's the other way around, because then it would have revealed to everybody else in that room that she had all 7 colors. Now that would be a pretty big deal, wouldn't it?
Well, it's not like such a big secret, because when she had her baptism, everybody could see that she had all 7 colors.
Actually, I thought only Ferdinand could see that because they only showed up in the middle.
Well, he was the only one that really saw it, but it didn't sound like he really advertised it.
Right. All he said was, as expected. He didn't actually say, you have the divine protection of so-and-so. Pretty much nobody knows. And we in this book, we find out why Ferdinand has all 7 attributes as well, which is apparently pretty important.
Yes, it is. Now it is time for them to cook the food. So they're gonna have dinner, and Rozemyne finally gets to taste that delicious salted fish that she had wanted all this time. And as she eats it, she says, this fish tastes so good. I've come to want 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻𝐻. And it is a very extreme sounding comment. The only person that was like, yeah, that's a really good idea, was none other than our lovely 𝐏𝐻𝐻𝐻, who thinks that everything she wants to do is the best idea. And it wasn't until he approved of that sentiment that she actually realizes that, maybe I said something wrong. It sounded like Rozemyne wanted to rule over 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻𝐻. And it makes sense, though. I mean, if she were to rule over 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻𝐻, a lot of 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻's problems would be solved. Like, namely, there will be no Georgine to make their lives miserable. So the 𝐏𝐻𝐻 does have a point. However, Ferdinand is like, And one other thing is that Ferdinand wants to try her fish. And we go back to that episode where Sylvester said that her food smelled good. And he said the same. Your fish smells quite agreeable. And mine reluctantly gave him half.
She knew exactly what she should have done, but she didn't. Because it was her fish.
Yeah.
And how dare he try to steal her fish?
That's
so she was
right.
like, I'll just give you half.
Yeah, and I think that was very generous indeed. I would not even give half. I would have been like, la-di-da. I forget what happened. I don't see anything. Because it's been years, literal years, since she has eaten proper fish.
I like how Ferdinand complained about how, all of this mana I'm wasting on the magic tool and how it's not even worth it trying to prepare the fish. But when the actual food comes, prepared by Rozemyne's chefs and with her instructions, he doesn't complain and he eats it really quickly.
That's right.
So,
he's such a grump.
In general, when you properly prepare fish, it is always delicious. So
of course, yeah.
As a fisherman, that's where I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, and also remember that every time he would try fish, it would be probably an 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻𝐻 recipe. And given the associations he has with 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻𝐻 and eating 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻𝐻 food, probably his previous experience was like, fish is poisoned, or dishes that have anything to do with 𝐼𝐹𝐼𝐻𝐻 are going to be bad for me, or Veronica is going to have tainted them so that they taste either really gross, or they make his tummy hurt, or they're just outright poisoned. So this is a new experience for him too. Somebody pointed out that maybe he was also experiencing this salted fish for the second time, because remember when they went to Mine's dream world, Mine ate the fish and Ferdinand was able to taste it. So maybe he liked it also from that memory, and now associate this fish with memories of eating a meal that your mother made you, or like a meal made with care, made with love. This also could be like another reason why Ferdinand seemed to really enjoy this.
We also know that he was described as having a blank expression, if I remember it correctly, during this part, which is usually when something is happened to him emotionally. So it would make sense that he was feeling some kind of way, experiencing this foreign and also very similar emotions that he experienced through Mine's memories.
Yeah, it seemed that he had an indescribable expression here. So whether it was just from his enjoyment of the food, just as for food's sake, tastes good, or maybe it had some emotional or some other kind of meaning, Ferdinand is not going to really give us insight into his mind, so we just have to guess. He was really thoroughly enjoying it, and that's that, at least in my opinion. So let's talk about spring prayer. It's basically really quick. The archducal family, they're involved in replenishing the land during spring prayer. They take turns, they fly all over the duchy, they do the spring prayer, and that's pretty much done and over with. However, after that, they have to visit 𝐏𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐻, where they have to establish another printing workshop. Now, there are many in 𝐏𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐻 who wish for Rozemyne to become 𝐏𝐷, and they are her blood relatives. And they all have, or most of them actually, especially the older generation, they have a huge grudge against Veronica and by extension Wilfried, and maybe even Charlotte a little, but mostly Wilfried. So Wilfried, Charlotte, and others joined him to go to 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄, which is enemy territory for Wilfried especially. And Wilfried seems to have blind optimism. He's like, I'll just do my duty and I'll show them I'm capable and then we'll be okay, you know, everything will be fine. I mean, even Sylvester is nervous for him and asks Rozemyne to kind of look out for him. And Rozemyne promises that she's going to protect both of them. Because after all, didn't they protect her when she had just woken up from the 𝐏𝐿? So this is her paying back the favor.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Wilfried felt like out of his element during much of these interactions. And he absolutely relied on his, siblings moving forward, for sure.
So it turns out that so many people are against Wilfried because they don't want him to be 𝐏𝐻. They want Rozemyne to be 𝐏𝐻. They want somebody who does not have a single drop of Lady Gabrielle's blood running through her veins. But ultimately, the current 𝐏𝐻𝐑𝐍𝐒, he's quite a practical man. He's like, you know what? I'm willing to give my support and not be so hostile. It's actually the grandfather, our grandfather, that you need to deal with, you need to convince, because he's also the one that's, rallying the troops. To which Wilfried is like, okay, all we have to do is just convince your grandfather. I'm like, you precious child, you have no idea what you're up against.
Like a stand-up comedy act with this guy.
I really like how he used his poor health as a weapon.
Well, that too, yeah. He's just like, I'm just gonna pretend and ignore you, and just until you say what I want you to. I can't hear you,
or I can't see you because I'm so old.
Yeah,
but I can definitely hear Rozemyne because she's my precious great granddaughter. We get a lot of the story of 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄 as a 𝐏𝐻𝐑𝐿. We've already been told in a previous a few books ago, actually. Why 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄 wanted Rozemyne to be 𝐏𝐻 in the first place. It turns out back when Lady Gabrielle joined the Duchy, if I remember correctly, one of the first wife of the time was demoted to second wife. And she was from the 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄. So it was like a slap to the face to give 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄, which was, great-grandfather, Rozemyne's great-grandfather. And he got ostracized by the faction that Gabrielle made. And then, after her, it was Veronica. And Veronica also ostracized all of 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄 as well. Which is especially insulting since 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄 was Ehrenfest's breadbasket. They were the ones who produced most of the food.
Yeah. The man suffered a lot in the past, like you said, because of Gabrielle and then Veronica. So now he's super old. He's barely holding on to life through, I'm guessing, through his anger and just his hope that Rozemyne will be the next 𝐏𝐻. And everybody's assuring him, you know what? It'll be fine. She's going to marry Wilfried. Everything will be okay. We'll have a 𝐏𝐼𝐔𝐄 on power, as first wife. He does bring up a good point, though. I'm here quoting from the book. It says, Ehrenfest was climbing higher up the duchy rankings each year, and now greater duchies were giving us their attentions. Great-grandfather had assumed that another archduke candidate from a greater duchy would once again come into the picture and force me from my position as future first wife, and that I would end up suffering in spite of everything I did to improve and bring wealth to Ehrenfest. His own prediction outraged him, and the hatred that he felt for Lady Gabrielle and the 𝐏𝐻 of the time was instead directed at Wilfried and Sylvester. So basically, grandfather wanted to avoid a repeat of such a great tragedy, and that's why he's set on ensuring that Roz becomes 𝐏𝐻, because if Rozemyne is just stays as first lady, there's nothing really that's going to protect her from being demoted, just as his own mother was demoted back in his day. And he does not want her to suffer like that again.
I think she'd rather be demoted.
Wouldn't she, huh? It is ironic. If you put it in that perspective, you kind of see he has a point. However, Sylvester is very well aware of what has happened. Even Wilfried himself is well aware of what has happened, and they're willing to take measures to stop that from repeating itself, should there be another wife coming in from another duchy. One of the other things that they showed is how, because Wilfried is so used to seeing her collapse, or at least has already seen Rozemyne, the aftermath of Rozemyne collapsing during a social event. He and the rest of Rozemyne's retainers, they're all kind of like calm about it when they see the grandfather collapse. And Rozemyne's like, how can you be so calm? And they're like, easy, we just have experience with you. That was a really funny line. I really liked it. And he's like, look, even Charlotte, she's okay, right? And Charlotte's like, poor Charlotte. She's so dear.
She's hanging on.
She's hanging on. Like, I don't know if she's actually seen mine collapse, but she has been around to see the aftermath and deal with a ruined tea party now and then.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think his life is really tragic. In most of his life, he's suffered all these indignities, and then he had all his hopes put on Rozemyne. Unfortunately, they didn't come to fruition.
Unfortunately, the effects of Gabrielle forcing her way into marrying the Ehrenfest Archduke candidate, the effects of that are just so far-reaching, and we can only hope that the generational trauma is stopped at some point. At the end, the final thing that we see is Rozemyne looking back at her grandfather, and he's just sitting there sadly. I think he's crying also. And that's very, very poignant, very sad.
It's always sad to see an old man cry.
For sure, yeah. We're getting closer to the meat of the book. I promise you, we're almost there. We're going to talk about sitting out the Archduke Conference. We can do this really quick. So it basically covers day-to-day life in the castle as they stay in there with Bonifacius, and they just help supply the Mana Foundation while the archducal couple and various retainers are away for the conference. Ferdinand also stays behind for the sole purpose of basically preparing Rozemyne, and because Will and Charlotte and even Melchior join in, he is also preparing them for their future Archduke candidate courses. He's so gracious in letting Melchior in, but he's kind of like, the moment you disrupt the class, you're gonna be kicked out.
What a hero.
I know. What condescension, what graciousness. He's really come a long way. But Melchior is a good sport. He joins in and he's quiet, and he's just excited. He just wants to be close to his siblings, and the more I read about Melchior, the more adorable he is. However, there's an end to these things because he suddenly gets called to the Royal Academy. He goes there and then he returns a little later and reveals the shocking truth that Arensbach requested Ferdinand as a groom to Detlind. Now, Sylvester declined when Arensbach came with that request, but Ferdinand was called to speak for himself and to just say, no, I don't want this for himself. And Ferdinand goes, he flatly and in no uncertain terms declined, and then just went back home. However, it wasn't very long after that Ferdinand was again called to the Royal Academy once more, and this time he was ordered to marry her by the king himself, as is revealed in the report on the Archduke Conference. Before we head into that, I just want to talk a little bit about just the results of the Archduke Conference. Basically, after the Archduke Conference, Ehrenfest's ranking is now 8th place, which is actually quite a jump from being 13th in Rozemyne's first year to now 8th. And now they're doing business with Klassenburg, the Sovereignty, and Dunkelfelger. They took some spots away from Klassenburg to kind of punish them for having, strong-armed their merchant and just left her behind in Ehrenfest. So they gave some of those spots to Dunkelfelger. They also sold the Rinsham and some recipes for certain sweets, and Ferdinand received his winnings from the dinner match. So let's go. Outwardly, Ferdinand, being engaged to the Arensbach Archduke candidate, is seen as a stroke of good luck. Just how fortunate, how wonderful that love would come into his life, right? And how great that a greater duchy such as Arensbach would seek a former temple priest for a groom. It's considered an honor. And Ferdinand received the words of congratulations from everybody with a brilliant smile, but Rozemyne can see through it. He's pissed off, and so is Sylvester. Roz has learned to read his expressions, and the more that he received words of congratulations and the more she learned about this engagement, the more Rozemyne became frustrated and sad for him that she almost wanted to cry. One line I really liked was, just how much pain does Ferdinand have to endure in his life? Now he has to marry Lady Bertilde, who's more or less a young version of Lady Veronica, the woman he hates the most. Will the world ever let him be happy? So after this, everybody goes away. They have stuff to do after the debrief, the report. Except for Ferdinand, Rozemyne, and Sylvester. They all stay back and they have a serious talk. It's a more private meeting. That's the title of the chapter. And when it's just the three of them, Sylvester is just super pissed off at the royals' underhanded methods of summoning Ferdinand. And they made it impossible for Sylvester to intervene and find a way around the order. And he actually says, I don't want you to suffer any more than you already have, Ferdinand. So if there's any doubt about how much Sylvester loves his little brother, these doubts can be put to rest. He seriously only wants his brother to just be happy, He's seriously worried and concerned. However, Ferdinand tells him that there really is no way that you can disobey the king's order. 𝐏𝐻𝐿 shot up through the ranks while making no effort to assist the king. 𝐼𝐻𝐿 is a greater duchy with mana issues, and of course it's going to be prioritized over a neutral one. And so 𝐼𝐻𝐿 needs to show that they're willing to listen to the king by obeying this order. He also says that Drowenshill and Dunkelfelger spoke up in support of Ferdinand, and they thought that by forcing this marriage, they would be helping him. Because they thought that he was being mistreated in 𝐼𝐻𝐿 since he's still in the temple. Then
that was a wonderful misunderstanding.
Wasn't it? We even get a whole short story at the end with Chit's point of view, which is oh my gosh, please don't. I mean, you're right. If it were under any other circumstances, if it had been 10 years ago, this would have been a very, very welcome thing indeed. But now, dude, no, please no. So Drowenshill and Dunkelfelger, they ganged up and they spoke up. They also said that Rozemyne is also an example of how 𝐼𝐻𝐿 never sends children of the first wife to the temple, but all the others are abused. Even though Rozemyne is so talented, she's still stuck in the temple as the high bishop, and that is seen as, an abuse on the part of Sylvester and the archducal family in 𝐼𝐻𝐿. And they think that it is unthinkable that they would crush such young talent. So everybody's just wanting to save him. It is just spectacular how little they know and how it backfires. He goes over all these lists of why it's basically they have no other choice but to accept. But most importantly is that 𝐼𝐻𝐿 is not long for the world, so the need to have someone support 𝐼𝐻𝐿 is rather urgent. They need an unmarried adult archduke candidate with the mana and bureaucratic experience necessary to serve as a representative of a greater duchy. And basically in all of Jürgen Smith, only Ferdinand fits the bill. And finally, Ferdinand concludes that going to 𝐼𝐻𝐿 will be beneficial because he would be able to keep an eye on Georgine, who is basically 𝐼𝐻𝐿's biggest foe, and he could work from there to constrain her. What does Sylvester say ultimately?
He basically relents. He understands why he's doing this, but he doesn't agree with it.
But there's somebody who is still unhappy and not satisfied with all of these things, and that is Rozemyne. She knows that there's way more to it than this, and even Sylvester knows, but he already knows that his brother is, really secretive. So he's like, you're going to continue to be secretive and keep things from me. I can't do anything about it, so I'm just going to have to relent. But Rozemyne is not going to, accept that. She will draw out those secrets and the real reasons why he is acting like that and why he accepted, which is why she demands that they have a private talk in the hidden room. Now, Jürgen Smith has a long-standing agreement with a foreign country called Lanzenau that every few generations they will let a princess from that foreign country come to live at a villa in the sovereignty for the sole purpose of having babies with high mana. And from those babies, one of them would be chosen to become the king of Lanzenau. The first princess that was brought in was called 𝐏𝐿𝐔𝐄, and ever since then, any children born from one of these Lanzenau princesses are called seeds of 𝐏𝐿𝐔𝐄, despite the fact that the original princess 𝐏𝐿𝐔𝐄 has long since passed away. Ferdinand was one such seed of 𝐏𝐿𝐔𝐄, and he says in the chapter Decisions that he was destined to die. You see, any females born here are spared and raised as Jürgenschmidt princesses. However, in order to prevent a battle for succession in Lanzenau, and to make sure that only the strongest boy ever became king of Lanzenau, All the other male children were killed off. Boys born here do have a chance to live past their baptism, but only if their sires decide to adopt them as their own children and take them home with them. However, this course of action would just bring conflict to their own houses, so that option was highly unlikely. There was one noble who did do this. 𝐏𝐓𝐄𝐍𝐒, by the guidance of the goddess of time, adopted Ferdinand. As far as Ferdinand is concerned, despite the fact that he was born of this Lanzanov princess in this high-class brothel, he considers himself to have no mother. His biological father is 𝐏𝐓𝐿, and Ehrenfest is his home.
I really like the picture that they provide when they're talking in the hidden room.
Yes, the colored insert is fantastic. It's so full of emotion. I'm like, this whole chapter, it always like hits me right in the feels. When they have their talk at last, Rozemyne drags out the truth from him, and it basically all boils down to how Ehrenfest needs to prove their loyalty. And not just Ehrenfest, but Ferdinand in particular needs to prove his loyalty.
Because he's a seed from that place, and that inspires potential fear in a, I don't know what the proper term is, a coup? I don't know. An uprising? He's put in a position where it's just like, okay, prove it then. If you're not going to like assert me, then do this thing that locks you in a position that guarantees that you can't, more or less.
Yeah, Archduke candidates cannot be royals. So he is the seed of 𝐏𝐑𝐎𝐋𝐿, or Adel, I don't know how you say it. That's how I'm going to say it. So anyway, so this means that he has royal blood, and given his competence, how they believe that he's the mastermind pulling the strings, you know, and he's the one behind Rozemyne's achievements, and how he seems to be using Rozemyne to search for the missing 𝐏𝐑𝐿𝐔𝐄, and how he is seen as an element that is sowing seeds of uncertainty around royals. The royals want him to prove his loyalty and want him to willingly step away from being in any position of claiming Zenthood. He must either become 𝐏𝐓𝐿 himself or marry into Arensbach. Either one of these choices would make it impossible for him to claim Zenthood. It is a very cruel ultimatum, and Ferdinand decides to sacrifice himself to save Ehrenfest. So he decides to distance himself from his homeland, since it is already out in the open that he is a seed of 𝐏𝐿𝐔𝐄. We don't know yet if 𝐏𝐓𝐿 is, or the previous 𝐏𝐿𝐔𝐄 was his father, or if it was some other man. The point is that he was adopted, and Ferdinand recognizes no other father except 𝐏𝐿𝐹 as his father. And when Ferdinand asked, why did you adopt him? His father replied, you know, it was that the goddess of time was involved in all this, and he had been assured that bringing Ferdinand into Ehrenfest would be very beneficial to the duchy. And as such, Ferdinand intends to fulfill his promise to his father to always support Archduke Sylvester and Ehrenfest as his home duchy.
Which is why he said Earth might get dueled when he spoke with the Sovereign Knight Commander.
That's right. Ultimately, Ferdinand values his promise to his father and his brother so much that he is willing to do whatever it takes to protect them. And here's another quote that I really liked. It says, "I gave my father my word that I would make Sylvester the Archduke and dedicate my life to Ehrenfest to support him. I could never break that final promise we made. If my only other option is eliminating Sylvester and taking the Archducal seat myself, I would much rather marry into Arensbach. He must never know that there was an alternative." And with this, Roz finally understands that since she also made similar promises with her own family, she decides that she cannot get involved and make Ferdinand break his precious promise with his father.
Right now, like the whole promise thing, it's another kind of like, it repeats again the thing of Rose being sensitive to people having like goals and wishes and like desires that they promise to.
Yeah.
And it really is a weak spot with her.
Yes, yeah. And after she learns this, she can't say anything to have him break the promise because she knows the value of a promise. But yet she also knows Ferdinand very well. She knows that he would endure all kinds of suffering and pain and not think about his own welfare while in Arensbach. So she blackmails him and makes him promise to take care of himself while there and to write often to assure her that he's doing okay. She also tells him that she would come to save him if he was ever in need.
In the most crazy way possible.
I know. Because he's like, would you come save me at the cost of making an enemy of the entire duchy? And what does Rozemyne say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She says that if she needs to, she would find the Kutushite itself and become queen.
Ooh, those are some fighting words, Rozemyne. And of course, Ferdinand's like, what the hell are you saying? Do you realize what you're saying and how impossible that is?
Well, it wouldn't be impossible for her.
How blasphemous those words are just in general. Like in any other setting, that you might just get hung for saying that.
Yeah, for saying she would overthrow the current monarchy, right? Or the current ruling family. And Ferdinand is just in disbelief of the lengths that she'd take for his sake. But she tells him that of all, that's something that she would do for her family. She tells him that of all the noble people, he's the one that's cared for her more than anyone. And she thinks of him as family, which actually astonishes him. And by the way he covered his mouth and turned away when he heard this, I think he felt quite moved and even happy about it.
But it is a big bit of character growth for Ferdinand. It's more or less like he's having his feelings kind of like confronted into his face. It's like, people care about you, other people care about you. Why don't you realize that people care about you? I care about you. I'd be willing to do all of this shit for you because you've already done all of this shit for me. Like, I wouldn't be here if it weren't for you. Why can't you realize that? Why can't you like reciprocate the feelings that I'm putting towards you? Like, why do you have to be so self-deprecating? Why do you have to put yourself last in all of these scenarios?
Mm-hmm. Ferdinand, I think, also always felt guilty that he ripped mine away from her family. So the fact that Rozemyne tells him that she thinks of him as family and she would go through similar lengths for him, I think it kind of gives him like a feeling like he's been like he's received some kind of forgiveness, or like kind of has made up over the years for having done that. And I think that's something super important too, because he's always been very observant of how families work. I guess it's like something that interests him a lot because it's something that he's just learning himself, like how to be family, how do families interact. And now he is confronted with reality. After all these years, he has made a family for himself, even though it's not a blood family, but Rozemyne now thinks of him as family. And it's like so great for him, to the point that he would kind of smile and turn away, and he has to cover his mouth because he's so pleased, but he also doesn't want Rozemyne to notice. And also during the next couple of chapters until the end of the book, we get him always saying like, well, if I'm your family, why don't you do this? And if I'm your family, then why don't you do that? Like he's kind of like teasing her about it, like to force her to do things that he doesn't want to do. But he's kind of capitalizing on it, like kind of like relishing the new feeling of having somebody who's be your family to support you unconditionally. So I thought that was kind of cute also in the next couple of chapters. But again,
it just felt like Ferdinand being Ferdinand.
I know.
He's just like, well, I can do this, and like I need this done, so I'm going to do it the most efficient way possible. I'm just going to like abuse that new kind of thing I can like poker with.
Yeah, but I thought it was kind of like an endearing sort of way, because he knows that Rozemyne can see through it, and it's something that and he used to say like in events when she's like pushing through, like for example when she wanted him to make a face stone for Detlin so he could start off on the right foot with his fiance. He's like, no, like I don't want to put extra effort on this. I already made one back in my college days, so I'm just gonna reuse that one. And she's like, no, don't do that. You have to do something new. Come on, let's work together on making one. And he's like, no, it exists and it shall continue to exist and it shall be used. And if you want something else, then why don't you make it yourself? After all, you're family, right?
She's the only person that he can have this sort of relationship with, because Sylvester always has to put his duchy first. But for Rozemyne, family is the most important thing for her. So this is the first time that someone is truly putting him on the first place in their lives. Yeah. And that's why they can nag each other and have this kind of bickering. Yeah. Because it's all love coming from a place, and they know that when it comes to it, they're really there for each other and they will hold each other's backs.
For sure. So, I mean, he's kind of like using it, but I don't think he abuses it too much. At least not in a way that mine would find it seriously like difficult to do. Like it's just for like, fine. Like, I don't know, there's a difference between using your connections for like abusing it and another just like kind of like in a teasing manner. I saw it in a teasing manner, but then again, I guess I have a different interpretation of Ferdinand that most people have. So there, that's also
well, it's both.
Huh?
It can be both.
It can be both. That's true. Or not.
Because in that situation, I agree with you. He was teasing her. It was more of a dismissive thing, but he's also used it in another instance where it's just like, oh, you're my family. You can do this for me. And she's been like, hey, yeah, sure.
That's true. Like when he hosted Detland and he had Rozemyne come and also host, right?
Detland.
Yeah, Detland. Oh, we'll get
Detland
there
is
soon
a whole
enough.
other kind of worms.
We'll get there soon enough. Oh my goodness. And this is a chapter that shows that Rozemyne and Ferdinand, after all this time, have, they've gone so much closer. And this bond is unlikely to break even through the distance because Rozemyne has basically made it so. She has said, if you don't take care of yourself and you don't get in touch with me often, I will go and rescue you. And Ferdinand has no other choice but to agree to either be happy or to ask for help if he's in a difficult situation. With Ferdinand leaving, a lot of changes must take place. He has to find a replacement in the temple, and 𝐏𝐻𝐿 volunteers to take his spot as high priest, for his own nefarious purposes. He wants to be ever closer to Rozemyne and to support her in all her endeavors, so he takes his job very seriously, and he announces his intention to all the other blue priests. He will ensure that Lady Rozemyne, the esteemed saint of Ehrenfest, is not burdened with unnecessary work, and as the high priest, he says, he will dispose of any dead weight holding her down. What a wonderful sentiment. He is also made to understand that the role that he's going to be in is basically to babysit Rozemyne and to ensure that the ceremonies that she performs won't fail. Additionally, there are some changes in relationships between 𝐏𝐻𝐿 and Angelica especially, as they decide to cancel their engagement since 𝐏𝐻𝐿 will be moving and Angelica has decided to stay with Rozemyne. Far from disappointing him by, canceling the engagement, we learn that her resolve to serve Rozemyne faithfully and loyally and to do her best in Ehrenfest impresses 𝐏𝐻𝐿, because that way Ferdinand will have less to worry about when he's in Arensbach.
Honestly, I thought the whole Angelica 𝐏𝐻𝐿 engagement was actually kind of like an interesting little bit, because they always, on both sides, didn't really put much effort into it. But in separating, they both realized that they kind of like respect each other more for how dedicated they are to their post. It's just like they didn't get caught up in the romance, which made them more romantic to each other. I don't know. It's kind of funny.
Even though it was kind of a convenience thing, they're kind of made for each other. They're not after romance, but they, as partners, as a partnership, they would have made a great team. And sorry to see that ship go, but ultimately they both prioritize their masters. That's what makes them so good for each other.
Was there a discussion with what is going to happen with who she has to marry going forward? Or is that in the next book?
That's actually in this book. It's a little later. Yeah, if you want to talk to us about that and what other people she has left to marry, talk about it by all means.
Well, it turns out that, Cornelius doesn't want to marry her because he has Leonro and they're engaged right now. They haven't married yet. And it would be insult to Leonro for him to take another wife that's older than her. So that was his excuse. Lamprecht can't marry her because Aurelia is pregnant right now, and would also be an insult to Aurelia if he were to take another wife so soon. So, pretty much everybody in 𝐏𝐻𝐿's family is a no-go. 𝐏𝐻𝐿 himself is definitely a no-go. So that kind of leaves nobody else except for Bonifacius. But then Rozemyne says, against it because Bonifacius is so much older than her. But then Angelica says, oh, no, I don't mind. As long as they're stronger than me, it's fine. So it's kind of like another aspect of her that's kind of a bit crazy.
Yeah, like when the prospect of marrying either 𝐏𝐻𝐿 or Bonifacius comes up, in the event that they can't find anybody else, rather than being aghast, she actually is smiling. Even Rozemyne is what in the world is going on? And 𝐏𝐿, who had been preparing to write a wonderful, touching love story, she's just like, oh no. Like, she was able to see the truth.
But I wonder if she's actually put thought into this, like how much she is thinking about it. Because, like, right now, like, we know she's not good at explaining things outwardly, but I kind of wonder if she's thinking, it's like, oh, well, if I have like a really, really strong partner, obviously I'm going to intentionally try to have a really, really strong child. Then maybe she's thinking, oh, then I get to train and have like training sparring sessions with my child. And then I get to train all throughout my life and stuff like that. Like, I wonder how much she's like consciously thinking about further down the line.
Wow.
Like that. I don't know.
You know, I never thought about that, but that is such a wonderful, you know, that's so wonderful. Imagine training with your mom, and so you can be like a badass, right? So by the time you get to a Royal Academy, you can just rule everybody.
I'm just imagine, no matter like what child she has with whoever, like it's gonna be like someone who's like forcibly trained. It's like, okay, now we're gonna be doing this. Now we're gonna be doing this. It's like, but mom, I want to learn how to read books and learn that. Nope, training.
Just imagine that, a brainy child coming out from Angelica. Wow, that would be intense.
Angelica and Bonnie's child, oh god, just becoming a bookworm and be like, no, I want to go hang out with Auntie Rozemyne. She's like, no, we're going train, and drags him off into the woods for an expedition.
Those training regimens are going to be brutal for those kids. Okay, whoever ends up being like the father of Angelica's children, they better bring some much needed balance to that lifestyle, because I kind of pity the children. If they're not going to be into fighting, which it's kind of unlikely since they'll be surrounded by fighting and stuff, like, they're going to suffer quite a bit. So finally we get preparations, not only for Ferdinand's departure, but also because we get word that Georgine and Detlind are going to be joining them in the summer. So Ferdinand intends to leave Ehrenfest after doing a purge and disposing of as many dangerous elements within the duchy as he can, and he asks the lower city folks to protect Rozemyne and keep an ear out for anything suspicious when he goes away. Ferdinand also has Rozemyne prepare a 𝐏𝐻𝐄 with the ingredients that he won from Dunkelfelder. That's right, those hugely expensive and precious ingredients that he managed to get from 𝐏𝐻𝐿. Well, he turned around and gave them to Rozemyne so that she could have another go at the 𝐏𝐻𝐄, and so that the last of her mana clumps would be dissolved. After much trepidation, she went into the 𝐏𝐻𝐄 and emerged after 4 days. Rozemyne tells...
I was upset there was no dream sequence this time. Is anyone else?
Oh, you were disappointed that there was no dream sequence?
Yeah, because like last time we kind of got a little bit of like Think Weird World where she had the watering can. I kind of expected that we were going back there, and when we didn't get it, I was sad.
Oh, that is kind of sad. I also did thought that she would get a little bit of a watering can situation or another dream, but maybe it would have undercut the seriousness of the whole thing. Or maybe it's because she's just grown up more. Or maybe she doesn't have that many mana clumps.
It's such a short amount of time in comparison,
yeah.
So it's understandable that Conscious might not have had time to wander, but...
Yeah, I mean, compare 4 days to 2 years. So that's really significant. She does emerge, and she doesn't feel any stronger, but at least she'll be able to use her mana much, much better. Rozemyne tells Ferdinand to order a hairpin for Detlind, and he hoists that job onto her since, like I said before, they are family. And he tells her to order one for herself as well, and to consider it his farewell gift. So he's actually being nice somewhat. And it's funny how he continues to bring up the family thing to get her to do all sorts of tasks for him. Ferdinand just doesn't give a damn about Detlind. He is going to give her the All Elements face stone that he made at the academy that has a generic message inscribed on it. There is a meme that somebody sent me that was Ferdinand preparing gifts for Rozemyne, and then another Ferdinand preparing gifts for 𝐑𝐿𝐿. So in the first panel, it's, I don't know if anybody saw it, I put it in the meme section in this channel, so check it out. And it's basically like a little peanut butter sandwich that's super cute. And you know, it has, you saw it?
Yeah, it's a teddy bear shaped sandwich. Cut out from a regular sandwich. And then basically 𝐑𝐿𝐿 gets the outline of it. He gets the leftovers.
The leftovers, the crusts and all this stuff. So it's basically the same thing though. Anybody who's going to marry another person, they have to investigate, you know, what their significant other likes, and especially their affinities, because it has to match them. But since he is all affinities, he just made an all affinity stone, and that's gonna do the job for now. So aside from this preparation for 𝐑𝐿𝐿's arrival, she also talks about preparing food for Ferdinand to take in the time-stopping tool, so he can have something to eat and have some delicious food and flavors from home. And also, she talks about having Raymond work on a sound recording tool so that she can record into it reminders like, don't forget to rest and be sure to eat and so on. And I found it funny how Ferdinand says, like, if you give something like that to me, I'm going to throw it out the window.
Justice is in the same. You're just like, no, give it to me. I'll save it.
Yeah, right. He would just add it to all his collection of random tools. And
I think Hardmoon would want it more.
You think? He'd be like, my saint is telling me to rest. Yes. So again, during this time, Ferdinand continues to tutor her for all her upcoming classes at the Royal Academy. We don't know why, but he's just really like pushing her to like finish all her courses, or as many courses as possible. And Ferdinand gives Rozemyne his disappearing ink because it will help their communications. I've no doubt that if they ever trade letters, that those letters are going to be opened and read and redacted if they contain any serious information. So that is why it's important that they have a means to communicate, and thank goodness for that disappearing ink that Rozemyne made, because now they're going to trade inks and write to each other with them.
Right. Rozemyne will have Ferdinand's disappearing ink, and Ferdinand will have Rozemyne's disappearing ink. So essentially how it's going to work is when they write, and once it disappears, Rozemyne will be able to touch the letter, and since the ink was hers, she'll be able to read it, and vice versa with Ferdinand. I really like her observation how you can make magic circles for attacking or something anywhere, or you can hide things in contracts. So it's kind of scary.
That is really scary though. That is why Ferdinand was so adamant that she does not talk to anybody about that disappearing ink or show it, because there's so many ways it could go wrong. Summer comes around, and we have 𝐑𝐿𝐿, Georgine, and the retainers, including Raymond, come to visit. During the engagement ceremony, he gives 𝐑𝐿𝐿 the face stone that he made back at the Royal Academy. He doesn't care about personalizing it to match her preferences or her affinities, but he gets away with it because of the speech he said, which made all the women in the room, including 𝐑𝐿𝐿 herself, blush and get all teary-eyed. Meanwhile, 𝐑𝐿𝐿's speech is something akin to, hey, be grateful I'm willing to marry you, etc., 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 of course with noble euphemisms, causing 𝐏𝐻𝐿 to want to charge ahead and, I don't know, make some kind of bloody carnival or something. Thankfully, Eustace is there and he pulls him back, because otherwise who knows what would have happened right there and then. And actually, something really interesting or really curious and funny that I read later on was that when somebody asked Kazuki-sensei about what Ferdinand did with the face stone that 𝐑𝐿𝐿 gave him, she answered that he put the precious thing away in a box. He is not about to wear it and let her mana seep into his body, of course.
I would have loved the timeline where 𝐏𝐻𝐿 was unleashed and allowed to do what he wanted to.
Ferdinand has hinted in this book that he's a dangerous element. So maybe we can get some fanfic writers to our best and most gifted to write this scene. Now, Ferdinand hosts 𝐑𝐿𝐿 at his estate for her to order the hairpin according to her wishes. And while he and Raymond work on their research in the bookroom, Rozemyne and her siblings are also there to help with the hosting, and while they all do the work of making 𝐑𝐿𝐿 feel special and help with the ornament, Rozemyne happily reads the time away in Ferdinand's most impressive bookworm.
I thought it was funny how immediately, like, after Rozemyne gets the tea party set up, and it's just like, okay, now you have approval to start reading. It's just immediately gone.
I think it's hilarious how everybody thinks she's completely useless because as soon as she heard about the book room and how Ferdinand and Raymond are going to be in the book room discussing the magic tool, she's all like, I want to go to the book room. And now everybody thinks she's not going to be able to socialize. So Charlotte suggested that, maybe we should put her in the book room to begin with. Because now that she knows about it, she won't be able to socialize properly. So she gets upset because, Melchior's there and she wants to look good in front of Melchior.
These happy times come to an abrupt end because the Arensback people are called back home urgently. That's where the story ends before the epilogue. Okay, so let's talk about Detlin's short story. Before I go into it, anything that you want to share?
Detlin does not deserve Ferdinand.
Of course, nobody deserves Ferdinand.
Deserve to continue to live.
Detlin.
She's such a horrible child. Like, she's everything that is wrong with noble society.
Honestly, yeah.
But you know what? Contrary to what most people would feel, and I'm guessing you guys would feel, I kind of understand her a little more. Yes, she is hateful, and she will never in a million years deserve my wonderful, beautiful Ferdinand. Nobody deserves Ferdinand. Even I myself do not deserve Ferdinand. But she is like that because she was made like that. It's not really her fault. You have to take agency for your actions, but I do see where she came from and why she is like that.
I kind of view her as like a parallel world Wilfried in a sense, is if he was like actually left to Veronica's wishes in a sense, because I think Veronica ignored Wilfried's education in the same sort of way that Georgine ignored Deline's education, or it's similar kind of in a sense.
Yeah, I think the only difference, though, is that Wilfried was actually doted on by his grandmother, whereas Detlin, she was mostly ignored and neglected by her own mother. We know that Georgine has a very big grudge against her mother, so the fact that Detlin looks like Veronica did not help her at all. I don't think Georgine has a soft spot for the child, as evident in the way that she actually poisons her own daughter. She adds a little something to that drink, and Detlin is sick, and her illness is used as an excuse to dwell a little longer in Ehrenfest and to visit a certain, shall we say, friend of the family. I do agree that Detlin, she's hateful, but this part that her mother's attendant, by order of Georgine, poisons her, that's really cruel. The woman is ruthless, and I wonder, do we really want a woman like her to be Ob Ehrenfest? Between a cruel and ruthless woman like her and the overgrown elementary kid, I'd much take Sylvester, thank you very much.
I guess Detlin is kind of a side character in that way that her whole life's been decided for her. Even if she tries to suggest something, her mother would never take it seriously and would never follow her advice. So I guess it's kind of sad in that way that she finds enjoyment in control simply because she has no control in her life. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's why she is how she is. Still doesn't excuse her behavior though. Aurelia was very similar, even worse actually. She had even less control in her life, and yet, she's not like that.
Exactly. Additionally, how Detlin, what she wants in, her partner is somebody who will, love her and cherish her. And, her thoughts on this marriage are very apparent in this short story. She thinks that Ferdinand is beneath her. Yeah, she thinks that he's beneath her, but, she'll be happy enough if he's the type to give her what she wants and do her will. Yes, basically be her yes man. And, oh my, Detlin, you're in for a rude awakening because he's not the sweet, kind guy that you think that he is. He is the Lord of Evil.
And every time that smile strengthens and grows and sighs, it means he's getting more and more upset, but she's too oblivious to see it. And she's just like, oh, look at that beautiful smile of his. Oh, he's so pretty. Why doesn't he give me what I want?
Yeah. Basically, the outcome of this is we get to see a hint of some of what could make their relationship rocky in the coming chapters. There's just so much misunderstanding here. Like, we've seen before what happens when nobles have different expectations of each other going into marriage. We saw how Damiel and Brigitte's marriage or potential marriage fell through because their goals didn't align. But now it's even worse because expectations and just they both, like, one of them hates and loathes the other. It's going to be a mess. So we're going to see what happens to this couple soon enough. But for now, we're just left to see how other people view this marriage and view this union in the last of the two short stories. The first short story is from Chit's point of view. Remember, this guy is Ferdinand's best friend, or he calls himself his friend from his Royal Academy days. And we see how it came to be that 𝐑𝐄𝐓𝐔𝐄 gave their support and did whatever they could to, quote-unquote, rescue Ferdinand from the 𝐼𝐹𝐹 temple. Any thoughts about this short story?
A bunch of misguided fools.
Yeah, poor Chit. He just wants to save his bro.
It's the second time that he's interfered and tried to save his bro. He did it once when they were at the Royal Academy. He tried to force a union between Magdalena and Ferdinand. I mean, Ferdinand, he was not against the union, I'm guessing, because that would mean that he could leave 𝐼𝐹𝐹 and Veronica's abuse, but like, it all fell through, and now he feels guilty that in the past this marriage did not happen. So now he sees this as a chance to set things right. So in a way, he had the best of intentions, but this foolish man has no idea that he's not doing Ferdinand any favors at all.
He doesn't know the internal politics of 𝐼𝐹𝐹 right now. He's just like throwing water on a grease fire.
Yeah, exactly.
It was kind of interesting to see the inner workings of different duchy and see how they like interact both similarly and differently from the ones we already know.
We get to see the first lady of 𝐑𝐄𝐓𝐔𝐄. I think, like, in the whole of 𝐑𝐄𝐓𝐔𝐄, they need somebody like her to put a stop to all of their, their let's do this, let's go. Yeah, they're emotional, they get so enthusiastic. She puts the brakes on things, and true to form, she also puts the brakes on things here. Like, unless this marriage, or unless you can find a way that this will benefit our duchy, there's no way that we're going to get involved. And darn it if he didn't go and do it. He found ways to found ways and arguments and allies of greater duchy allies, Drauenchel, to speak up and to also join in and to convince the first lady to also, join in the cries that they must rescue Ferdinand from 𝐼𝐹𝐹. And finally, the last short story is Eckhart's point of view. Thoughts about this one?
Yeah, Eckhart has a really short fuse, and it shows how Ferdinand has struggled to deal with, his loyalty. His loyalty, since he only lies with him, he only really thinks about Ferdinand and not the consequences.
It shows why you need to sometimes have a named foreign person to prevent them from going out of control.
Yeah, so Eckhart is super pissed off at what Arensbach is doing to Ferdinand, and Eckhart is very dangerous. He's a very dangerous individual. He sees no reason why Arensbach Duchy shouldn't die, since because of them, through Veronica, Heidmarie died. And also, his solution to have Ferdinand not go to Arensbach is basically to go in and kill the king. So I don't know. I just wonder, between a fanatic like Eckhart and a cross-dressing quirky guy like Justus, I wonder how the poor lay noble Lasafram gets along with his co-workers. Like, seriously, he seems so adjusted and so polite that I don't know how he gets along with them.
He stays out of the way. He manages the house.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, Eckhart's mad again. I'll just make some tea and step out of the way.
I really want to see more stories that explore this relationship between them. We hardly got to know Lasafram in this story, so maybe we'll get to see a little bit more and maybe learn more stories from the Royal Academy days. As it was, we learn in this book the story behind Lasafram. He was also a lay noble, and he was basically given to Ferdinand to basically bully him, or another attempt to harass him by giving him a tenant who probably couldn't do his duty since he was so short on mana. Either way, like, he still became one of his most loyal retainers, also giving him his name as a proof of his loyalty. We also learn a little bit of how name giving works in this story. We know that everybody, like, let's say if you have given your name to somebody, their mana like kind of like surrounds you and you can feel it. You can usually just ignore it, but like when they give an order, you feel it intensify. And if you accept the order, that's good. But if you don't accept the order or you disobey the order, then you're gonna die. So we see how Ferdinand gives orders to his name sworn attendants, and that's actually interesting because we have been hearing and learning a little bit at a time how name swearing works. And last volume we saw how you make or how you name swear, with Roderick's ceremony, and now we see how orders and giving orders works when you name swear. My favorite part, however, of this story is when Eckhart realizes that things have changed, in the past 10 years. In the past, he was just Ferdinand and his retainers and the world was against them. But now Ferdinand is not alone. There's many people in Ehrenfest that care for him, and things are not as hopeless as they might seem. Like, they're able to move on to the next stage of their lives, moving into Ehrenfest, but with the knowledge that Ehrenfest has changed for the better, and maybe, just maybe, they can do the same in Arensback for their lord. Any other thoughts about this short story?
Other than the little discussion with Justus and Eckhart about how they have to make preparations to leave, and how Eckhart is probably going to give his estate to Cornelius, but in the condition that he saves a room with all his most important stuff, because he doesn't feel like he wants to get rid of the estate due to his memories of Henry. Yeah, because that house has memories of his ex-wife, and he doesn't feel comfortable letting go just yet. So from the afterword, we see that both of the short stories, Eckhart's and Chit's, they're both written, like, they're put side to side, and it's kind of like on purpose. Both of them are men who both strive to improve Ferdinand's situation and standing as much as they can, but they're just so narrow-minded in their approach that they aren't really helpful at all. Chit, for example, considers himself to be the other one's bestie and rallies a bunch of major duchies to save him, while the other one is, he's intimately acquainted with Ferdinand's sufferings all these years, and he's willing to commit regicide for his sake. And, that's not going to help anyone. If anything, it's going to make matters worse. But anyway, that concludes the book. From Part 4, Volume 9, we get this artwork. We get the artwork of Rozemyne, and it's snowy. So we can either assume that she's getting the Grutis height, as some people have said, or we can assume that, there's some magical things afoot, maybe a battle, who knows? There's some kind of thing going on here. It looks like a magic circle.
It looks like a magic circle. So,
and it looks like she has her staff in her hand.
Yeah, and Ferdinand is with her. So some time has passed and it's winter. So that's all we can gather from this information. The cover doesn't give us much. Now, if we were to see the inside color insert, it gives us just a little bit more information. But for now, that's what we get. And we have some stuff to look forward to. Mainly, we want to know what happened in Arensback. What is it that called them so quickly? Georgine and Detlind were enjoying their time, having a grand old party in Ehrenfest, and they were called suddenly home. So I want to know what exactly happened that caused them to come home. Was it like, did Arensback die, or what's going on? And if this were to happen, how does that affect the planned timeline of Ferdinand marrying Detlind after her graduation in the winter? So there's a lot of stuff that we have to know. We're going to see how Ferdinand talked about a purge, that he wanted to do a purge to eliminate as many dangerous elements from Ehrenfest. So is that going to happen here? What's gonna happen when that takes place? That's bound to cause some upheaval in Ehrenfest. So yeah, anything else that you guys can think of?
I got like a random tangent kind of that I thought of earlier. I didn't know if because it felt like I'd go off for like 5 minutes talking about it, but like, I kind of sympathize a little bit with Deline's situation in a sense where, like, not how she is now, but how she got to this situation, because how she'd been purposely neglected by her mother because how she looked like Georgine's mother. So, like, or Veronica, I guess. But in that same sort of sense, I wonder if her being ignored and, like, I guess, cast off to the side almost protected her, because we learn about her brother Wolfram dying of some sort of whatever. We don't really learn about that, but the more we learn about Georgine and how she's kind of been like pulling the strings behind the scenes, doing all this stuff, I wonder maybe in like an untold story somewhere that it was like Wolfram who maybe kind of confronted, or because he was putting up some sort of resistance to her, got taken out by like her mother. I don't know.
We'll see how Detland handles, you know, her new responsibilities when she graduates, because this is her last year. So it's going to be her last year at the academy. So we're going to see a lot more of how she handles roles of authority and how Georgine takes to her daughter's leadership style. One other thing that I did want to notice is we didn't really get a description of Detland's hair ornament, but Georgine was kind of like, she asked about the hair ornament. So you designed it yourself? It wasn't Ferdinand who designed it for you? She's like, nope, I made it per my own specifications and after my own, you know, my own taste. So Georgine was like, oh, okay, whatever. So she dismisses her. So Georgine in general dismisses her daughter. She's just a tool for her. But
another thing about that hairpin that I wanted to know is she specifically designed it to look better than Adolphine's. Yeah. Which, you know, could come back to bite her in the future.
Yeah, well,
you don't want to one-up royalty.
Yeah, you know, you never want to like kind of one-up them or show them down, or, well, yeah, and just how her mother's just like, okay, fine, you're gonna do that? Oh, fine, sure, whatever. It's.
I wash my hands off of you. I got that feeling too. She might have a bad
time at the Royal Academy if she shows up.
Well, we'll see. We'll see how that looks. We'll see everybody's reactions to her hair ornament, and I think it will not disappoint, in my opinion.
Or maybe it will, and that's
it will disappoint.
It won't disappoint by disappointing.
Yeah, something like that.
You won't be disappointed.
Yeah, exactly. You won't be disappointed. I can tell that for sure, as a spoiler, without spoiling. So, any other thoughts before we end this recording?
Favorite part of this book was the fish slicing that I was away for.
Fish slicing. Unfortunately, you didn't get to it, but we recorded it, so...
I'll have to step away for a sec. But no, that was my favorite part of the book, how she specifically looked at both Ferdinand and Angelica. It's just like, oh my god, you guys are so hot. I mean, what? Fish.
Yeah. My favorite part was, of course, decisions, and specifically the part where Rozemyne is trying to make him understand that she views him as family. And I just like every single instance where after that, Ferdinand brings up that, well, since you're my family, you do this, and since you're my family, then why don't you do this part? After all, aren't we family? So I really, really, really enjoyed that part, because we know that for a long time he's been curious about what it means to have family. And with Rozemyne, it's different than what he has with Sylvester.
Yeah, because her family is like a commoner sense of family that he, even now, probably still has a hard time wrapping his head around.
Yeah.
My personal favorite part was the prologue, because after decisions, the book gets a little bit heavier. So it's nice. When I was rereading the book, I found myself enjoying the most the Melchior's chapters, so the prologue and then the tea party, because it's just fun stuff and he's so adorable, and it just made me smile the whole time I was reading it.
Same here. There's just no competition. Melchior is the cutest of all the siblings, and maybe one day we'll get a little bit of a glimpse of Camille. Well, who knows if we'll get more glimpses of him. I am just so thankful that you guys joined me to discuss about this wonderful volume. I think it was a nice change of pace after the action-packed stuff that we got in part 4, volume 7, though it was very emotionally driven in the middle especially. So we'll see what part 4, volume 9 does to us. I can't wait to do this again with you all until then.
The only things that you'd be missing right now would be the end of volume manga and the illustrations in the beginning.
Yeah.
But everything else you can read.
Yeah, I should probably talk about that. But you know what? You know how long we've been recording?
3 hours.
3 hours. So somehow I have to edit this down, and I probably would have cut out the end of volume manga and stuff. But anyway, I'm so thankful that you guys have all joined me for this chat. It's always fun to fangirl about our favorite bookworm, and I hope that we can do this again. Thank you all so much.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank you for having us.
Bye. This is the end of our Part 4 Volume 8 review. Now you should be able to go into Part 4 Volume 9 without a problem. It will release very, very soon, and I hope you enjoy it. If you haven't already pre-ordered it, you can support this channel by using the affiliate links in the video description. As to this volume, let me know your thoughts about it, what your favorite scene was, and what you think will happen in the next volume. Remember, any spoilers past this book must be tagged and hidden. Thank you so much for watching and for your support. Until next time, bye bye.